Hello, this is Vulturefire, and it's time for the big one. This is version 1.0. This is the full release of Breach Wanderers. So this video is going to be covering things that have changed since the last release, which was 0.8012. There have been a couple of hotfixes since then. The most recent actual live patch is 8015, but only minor changes between 8012 and 8015. So anyway, lots of things are changing. Lots of things have been added. Let's get into it. Start with a new character. So the new character's name is Maighir, and he comes with a friend, Trill. So every fight, start of the fight, Maighir will start with Trill summoned in the personal summon slot. This is automatic. After every fight, Trill will start every fight at full health, regardless of whether Trill was alive at the end of the last fight, regardless of how much damage Trill had taken. Trill will show up good as new in the next fight at full health. Maighir's main themes include Arcane, Curse, Leech, and Ally Summoning. As you might imagine, with a built-in summon, Maighir is able to support ally-based strategies even more effectively than other characters like Paladin. Paladin has a unique ally summon card, but Maighir just always has a summon, which is very, very good. Maighir also has an ally sacrifice theme, especially once he hits level 4 and unlocks his alternate stance. And in addition to the alternate stance, he gains access to a second version of several of his cards. All that said, Maighir may sound complicated, but don't worry, he is much less complicated than Neamba was. I do hope to have up a basic overview of how Maighir works within not too long after this video goes live. If you are curious, check the description of this video. I hope to have a link to that guide once it is up. Assuming I get around to making it, we'll see what happens. There are a lot of guides I'm going to promise to make in this video, and we'll see how many of them end up materializing. So if you want to try Maighir, he costs 3,000 gold on PC or 1,000 gems if you're playing on mobile. So if you are unaware, on PC, Breach Wanderers is a one-time upfront purchase. On mobile, it is a free-to-play model where you can earn gems through gameplay, or you can buy them with microtransactions to get them faster. So depending on your platform, different currency costs. So aside from Maighir, the other absolute biggest new feature is Depth 4. So Depth 4 is, as you might imagine, a new difficulty. Just like with the other depths, you unlock it by completing a quest. In this case, it is the new Outside Influence quest. When you're playing on Depth 4, enemies in the first 3 areas will become more difficult. In particular, they like to, have new debuffs apply new debuffs that they didn't have before. They'll often do more damage, and they will add nasty blight cards to your deck that you'll have to deal with. In addition to having having harder enemies, there'll be new enemies in the Fetid Coast. And then after the Fetid Coast, after you've cleared the first 3 areas, new depth, of course, means a new area. And in Depth 4, that area is the Vortex. So the Vortex is a special kind of area. There are always exactly 3 fights in the Vortex. There are no events. In each fight, there will be a special weather called Manic Presence. It will do a variety of things. It has more cards than any other weather. I think it has something like 14 cards, and it does not have a lull. It is always on all the time. But it does have a variety of effects, that some of which are positive for the players and which are less so. And so of these 3 fights in the Vortex, the first 2 will be aspect fights. There are 5 total aspects, and they serve as sort of mid-bosses, mini-bosses, however you want to call it, before you fight the final fight that will win the run, which is Mudrera. And Mudrera has several versions, and which version you fight depends on, as you beat Mudrera each run, you will fight the next version after you win, and if you lose, you'll go back a version. I'll have a more detailed breakdown of what all of the aspects do, what all the forms of Mudrera do, and what they look like, and all of that in a future video. This is the short version. Be aware, Depth 4 is not easy. It is quite a bit harder than Depth 3. And I would say that if you aren't used to if you have played with idols and you have an idea of what that difficulty looks like, I would say Depth 4 is definitely harder than Depth 3 with 1 idol enabled. I don't know if I would say it is harder than Depth 3 with 3 idols enabled, because I have so much practice with D3, S3, as that is known, Depth 3 with 3 idols enabled, that it is hard for me to make that comparison, because Depth 3, S3 is going to be easier for me than it would be for most players just due to practice. But regardless, Depth 4, difficult, new challenge. Hope you're ready. There are also some other new friends. So these lovely fellows are new enemies that can now appear in the Aether planes, which is the normal area 2, where you normally find drakes and Sylga and Natha and Chimera and dragons and all of that. Those are all still there. They're just also these new friends. So these enemies do show up on Depth 3 and Depth 4. They are not exclusive to Depth 4. There are 3 normal enemies and 1 elite. And each of these enemies, of course, has 2 new cards that you can get. And they are quite good cards for several of these enemies, which will make you want to go and say hi. There are also some new Fetid Coast enemies. There are 4 new enemies in the Fetid Coast, 1 each normal, elite, mid-boss, end-boss. The new mid-boss and the end-boss only appear in Depth 4 runs, but I believe that the normal enemy and the elite can show up in Depth 3 runs, but I'm not completely certain about that. I should have checked, but I didn't. Each enemy also, of course, has 2 new cards, and in addition to these enemies having new cards, now that there is an Area 4, Baelator and Hollow Maw have cards. Previously they didn't, because if you had beaten them, you had won the run. But now that there is a 4th area, there are cards from the Area 3 end bosses. All right. So, in total, there are 3 new quests. I've already talked about one of them, an Outside Influence, which unlocks Depth 4. You will need to do that in order to see all of the Depth 4 stuff. So, if you're looking to play the new content as soon as possible, that's what you'll want to prioritize. Then there's the Final Confrontation, which unlocks the Shrine, which adds the additional difficulty modifiers. If you had previously been playing with the Shrine, you will need to do this quest in order to unlock the Shrine again. And of course, you'll need to do, because Final Confrontation requires you to have done Outside Influence, you'll need to do that first. So that is 2 quests you'll have to do before you can start doing Shrine runs again. It is worth noting, Final Confrontation, despite being a quest that unlocks the alternate difficulty modes, it is kind of meant to be your introduction to Depth 4 in a way. Because Final Confrontation is basically doing a series of Depth 4 runs where you have access to a special trinket that is very, very powerful that will make life easier for you. Finally, there is the A Special Meal quest, which requires you to be playing Maighir and requires you to have a level 7 plus Maighir to do. You will get a special trinket for completing it, but it doesn't have particularly special rewards relative to the other 2 quests, but it is meant mostly to be a challenge. It is a very difficult quest. It is on par with White Flame Golem, arguably harder because you are restricted to only using 1 character, which means that if you are not familiar with Maighir or you just aren't particularly good at using Maighir, you are not going to have a good time. I do have videos recorded of beating this quest with a couple, I think at least 2 different decks, and I've beaten the quest 3 or 4 times now, but it's definitely not easy. So by all means, let me know if you need help with it, and I will see what I can do. Or join the Discord and ask for advice there. On top of all of that, we have a new idol, the Idol of Corruption. So the Idol of Corruption will show up in the Shrine once you have it unlocked again, because you've done the Final Confrontation quest. It will randomly appear as one of the idols that's in the rotation, or, of course, if you have used the Easter egg to unlock additional idol slots, and you can now purchase 7 idol slots total, which will give you access to all 7 idols. Idol of Corruption has a global passive that reduces player healing and shield gain by 20%. Its battle passive starts player with a new sticky goo debuff, which I will talk about later in this video. And then Idol of Corruption is themed around shock and poison mostly. So those are the things to be aware of when you are trying to fight it. All right, so that is the headline new stuff. We're not out of new features yet. This is, as I said, a big update. So first of all, we have new generic cards. There are 6 new quest cards. There are 30 new cards from packs, and there's 1 new default unlock. So Assisted Spell is now just automatically unlocked instantly when you start the game. And there isn't any message about this, so it's easy to miss. So I've just included that here so you can see it. These are two of the cards you can get from packs. One thing to know here is that this brings us up to a total of 400 cards from packs, if I recall correctly. Once you have everything, 400 total generic cards, not counting quest cards, which is like, 61 cards default, and then the remaining 339 are from packs. Then we also have some new items. These are all just in the default item pool, with the exception of there's one new trinket that I mentioned from the special meal quest that is not included in this count of 22. So there are 8 new weapons, 5 new outfits, 13 new accessories, and 22 new trinkets. So this means not only will there be new things to find, but also it will be less reliable for you to find the things that you are used to relying on. So you'll have to learn some new tricks or just get luckier. There's also a new game mode. So this isn't really listed in game anywhere, but it's really neat, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. So you can now start a run without a full card pool. And what this means, normally this would just mean that, say, if you started with 30 out of 40 cards in your card pool, and it's 40 if you've unlocked Depth 4, then you would have a chance to see any cards in your card pool, but you would also have a chance to just randomly get any card that you have unlocked, similar to Quick Play, to fill in those empty slots are basically filled in with a chance to just roll a random card Quick Play style. So that you can't just, say, put 5 cards in your card pool and just get those 5 cards over and over again. You would get those cards as often as you normally would, and then the rest of the cards you'd be offered would just be random. But if you start with 0 cards in your card pool, then you get to play hybrid mode. And what that means is that you'll receive random card rewards like Quick Play, and you'll also, if you have no cards in the card pool, you'll get an extra upgrade and a reroll after boss fights as though you were playing Quick Play. And what this means is you can play effectively custom Quick Play. You build your starting deck, but you don't build your card pool, and then you get extra upgrades and rerolls so that you can, so if you have a deck idea where most of the key cards are in the starting deck, or where you're mostly relying on the starting deck and then monster pickups, this can be very, very powerful. And it can also just be an interesting new way to play. So, yeah, try it out. See how you like it. All right. Let's get into new mechanics. So there are several of these. First of all, Arcane Rage. So this is the alternate Maighir stance I mentioned. It is activated after Trill dies if you have the level 4 passive. While you have Arcane Rage, strikes will apply 2 arcane per hit. The arcane detonation will deal 4 extra damage, and Maighir will take 15% more damage. This 15% extra damage does stack additively with any other damage modifiers. So, for example, if you have Tough, which is minus 25% damage taken, minus 25 plus 15 is minus 10, so you'll be taking 10% less damage total with a combination of the two. Arcane Rage lasts the whole fight. Once Trill is dead, there is no way to get Trill back until the next fight. So be careful. Next up, we have a new debuff, Brain Freeze. Brain Freeze is basically Overcharged Frost Edition. Things with Brain Freeze gain 2 Frost whenever the player draws an extra card. And this is, I'll talk about it later, but Overcharged Change to match this wording. And so what this means is, extra card means the cards that you draw at the start of your turn do not count. Cards that you draw that don't trigger fatigue when drawn do still count. They are still extra card. For example, Pocket Shield, Pocket Sand. Even though they don't increase your fatigue counter, they are still extra draws. They will still trigger Brain Freeze. So it is, as you might imagine, a debuff used by ice-themed enemies, and it just kind of can make it a bit more difficult to play around in those fights. Although I tend to find it a relatively low impact debuff, it is worth being aware of. Now this one is not low impact. This is Decay. So when a card is created in the player's hand during their turn, everything that has Decay takes 1 damage per rank of Decay, and then they get another rank. If multiple cards are created simultaneously, Decay triggers once for each one. So if you have Decay 1, you create 3 cards, you'll take 1 damage, get another rank, take 2 damage, get another rank, take 3 damage, for a total of 6. Decay can be cleansed, but only down to 1 rank, and all ranks are lost at the end of turn from everybody. So normally, the only thing that's getting Decay is you. There is one Idol of Corruption card that can put Decay on enemies, but for the most part, this is a thing that is done to the player, and it can be nasty for some characters. If you're playing a character like Drofis or Inna or Naema that creates a lot of cards, this can rapidly add up to a lot of damage over the course of the turn, even if you started with only Decay 2 or 3. So, and treasures? Whoo boy, Decay hates treasures. If you create, 2 treasures and you try and play out both of them, it's a total of 4 cards created, the 2 treasures and then the 2 cards inside them. Which means if you start from Decay 1, you'll take 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10 damage. And that's starting from 1. It goes up quite a bit, quite quickly if you started with more than that, or if you've created other cards later on in the turn. Another new buff, Divinity. So Divinity has 2 effects. Damage dealt and status applied is increased by 5% per rank. Damage taken is decreased by 3% per rank. So this is a very, very good buff. It is doing both things that you want. It is increasing offense and decreasing, it's increasing both offense and defense for you, basically. It can't be dispelled, can be removed from enemies with Trinket Fantasgull, which is the one I mentioned that during the Final Confrontation quest makes that quest easier, or with the card Ultimatum, which is a reward from the Final Confrontation quest. There are a couple ways for the player to get Divinity. There is a Manic Presence card that does it, and there is a new legendary card that's also a reward from Final Confrontation that will give you Divinity. Mostly, Divinity is the thing that enemies get, especially in A4, and they can stack it. Some enemies can stack Divinity, and that can be a problem because that is a stacking percent increase to damage dealt and percent decrease to damage taken that you cannot dispel. It says damage taken, and status taken. So both of those are decreased. I think it's both. It's at least damage taken. Are decreased by 3% per rank. So you will need percentage bonuses in order to overcome this when you are fighting depth 4. Next up, Madness. So Madness has 3 effects. Maximum mana is reduced by 25%, maximum hand size is reduced by 25%, and fatigue threshold is reduced by 25%. And each rank the rank will wear off at the end of turn. So if you have normally a hand size of 10, it gets reduced to 8, I think. It feels like it should be 7 because of how rounding works, but I believe it actually is 8. Maximum mana, that part usually doesn't matter a ton unless you're saving a bunch of mana between turns. But fatigue threshold matters a lot because it means that if you were at 5, you're now at 4. If you were at 4 because of Idol of the Hunt or an item, you're now at 3. And it is really easy to forget this and accidentally trip Opportunist, especially since the new Depth 3 enemies love to combine Madness and Opportunist. The Crimson Prowlers and the Crimson Elemental tends to do this to you. So be aware of that. Now I have a keyword, Scaling. So this appears on a few items and on the card Glittering Reflection. It is technically reflects the thing Glittering Reflection already did, but that wasn't explained. Scaling effects increase based on the area. So we can see here Turtle Shell now says gain 8 scaling shield and tough 1. What that 8 scaling shield means is that in area 1 you'll get 8 shield, in area 2 you'll get 16 shield, in area 3 you'll get 24 shield, and in area 4 you'll get 32 shield. So it's that simple. Scaling effects are multiplied by the area, so it mostly shows up, like I said, on trinkets. So just, if you see that, now you know what it means. It means that this trinket is going to keep being good throughout the run instead of falling off when you get to later areas. Another new keyword, it's not technically a buff, which is why I'm using the word keyword. It's called Spirit Link. It is exclusive to Trill, Maighir's buddy. Whenever the player gains shield, Trill will also gain half as much shield. So if you get 10 shield, Trill will get 5. This is similar to the effect of the Rallying Tabard item, if you're familiar with that, but only for Trill. And anything that causes you to get shield, doesn't matter what it is. If you have gained fixed shield from Ramparts, if you gain shield from an item like Aura of Protection or Shield Bot, whatever the source is, you get shield, Trill gets shield. So that is a huge, huge benefit for keeping Trill alive during Maighir runs. Next up, our last new mechanic is Sticky Goo. This is a debuff that is exclusive to the Idol of Corruption. It doesn't quite do anything, aside from when you play a card, you lose a rank of Sticky Goo. That's all. And it can't be cleansed, so, no big deal. However, when you lose last rank, your turn ends immediately. So be careful. And it's worth noting, unlike a lot of other cards that trip, a lot of other buffs and debuffs that trip off of cards played, Sticky Goo does trip off of mana cards as well. Any card played will trigger Sticky Goo. It's worth noting you do lose, I forgot to list this here, if you end your turn with ranks remaining, the rest of the ranks are removed, so you're good there. But it does limit how many cards you can play each turn. If the Idol of Corruption is active in a fight, you will start the fight with 12 ranks of Sticky Goo, so your turn 1 will always be constrained in those cases. So, like I said, exclusive to the Idol of Corruption. So if you aren't fighting Idol of Corruption, if you're not fighting the idols at all, you don't need to worry about it. Next up, let's move on to the mechanics that have changed. First up, Frost. Okay, Frost in general hasn't changed. Basic mechanics, same as ever. What's changed is that the rate enemy max Frost increases is now lower in early areas, higher in later areas. For example, normal areas in Area 1 of a Depth 3 run will start at 10 Frost, and then they will go up by 8 after each freeze. In Area 3, they'll still start at 10, but now their max Frost will go up by 11. Previously, it would always be a straight plus 10 per freeze in Depth 3, regardless of which area you were in. And the reason that this changed is that it fixes kind of an issue that you have where it gets easier and easier to permanently freeze enemies as you go through the run. Because, early on, you would maybe struggle to freeze, bosses in Area 1 more than 2 or 3 times because you don't have any upgraded Frost cards. You have only commons really to work with. But then you get to Area 3, and now you're working with like upgraded rares, upgraded epics, and the bosses are still scaling their Frost at the same rate, but you are outputting Frost much, much faster. So this is to help compensate for that. And of course, just like with Depth 2 to Depth 3, Frost scales faster. Enemies in Depth 4 scale Frost even faster than in Depth 3. Next up, Hidden. Okay, I'm going to spend way too many words explaining this. The short version is Hidden has diminishing returns per evasion per turn. Specifically, okay, if you are interested in details, I'll get into those now. If you are happy with evasion or Hidden has diminishing returns each time you evade, you can move on to the next section now. So, the way it works. Hidden gives you plus 50% evasion chance. That is, at this point, reset at the start of every turn to 50%. What do I mean? Why do I say reset? Because each time you evade, using a random evasion, not a rank of evade, not a rank of the evasion buff, but if you just randomly evade thanks to your evade chance, Hidden's bonus will be reduced by 20% until it resets at the start of your next turn. So if you only have the 50% from evade, that means that you evade once, your evade chance is now 40%. If you evade again, you lose 20% of that 40%, so it goes to 32%. If you evade again, it goes to 26%, then 20%, and 16%, and so on. It will always only reduce the evade bonus from Hidden itself, not any other bonuses you have. So if you have 20% extra evade from items, you'll start with a base 70% evade chance, and then that will go down to 60%, the same minus 10 you would expect from just the Hidden. And then the subsequent numbers will also be 20% higher than the previous example, because you still get that plus 20% bonus still doesn't change. So instead of going 50, 40, 32, 26, 20, 16, it'll be 70, 60, 52, 46, 40, 36. And once again, to reiterate, this is specifically with random evasion chance. This changed because Hidden was just too strong. It was just way too easy, especially on Merle, where Hidden also affects status, to use Hidden to blink an absurd amount of damage. And so something had to change, and this is what One Day decided on. Is that Hidden, less of an effect each time. So you will need more defense, especially if you are dealing with large groups of enemies, or enemies that hit a bunch of times. You are very much going to need additional shield to deal with them. Fortunately, after all those words, the next several changes are very simple. This debuff used to be called Hollow. It's now called Nullify. Done. Marksman, no longer reduced at end of turn. It will just last until an attack is done or a dispel happens. Overcharged. Overcharged now only applies to extra cards drawn. So I sort of hinted at this when I was talking about Brain Freeze, but this means that you will no longer gain shock from drawing your normal hand for the turn. This means no more, I am overcharged and whoops, I'm shocked. I didn't get any chance to do anything. There was no way for me to avoid this. I'm just surprise shocked now. Of course, given how much weaker Overcharged is now, enemies that apply Overcharged have been buffed to compensate for this change. So look out for that. Lastly, in the change mechanics section, runes. Runes now apply a max of 10 status per hit. This doesn't affect Envenom, because Envenom is not a rune. But so previously, it was always 15% up to whatever number, minimum of 1, up to whatever you did. So if you did, 200 damage, you would apply 30 status. This ended up being a little too strong with really high damaging cards, especially like increasing stab decks. So it has been changed. So it is now capped at 10. This is not going to affect most decks. In order to be applying 10 status, you need to still be doing like 60 damage, I think. But it is worth being aware of. And so that's all the change mechanics out of the way. Now to other changes. There's a lot of stuff here, but I ran out of room on the banner, so it's all just other changes from here on out. New market items. So these are the things that you can buy from the market in town, the things that are last for the next run. There are 4 new items that can show up. The Elemental Tonic, which is +2 max Arcane, Frost, Shock. So instead of being 0 out of 10 before you've been Arcane detonated once, you'll be at 0 out of 12. Same as if you had like an item that gave you +2 max Arcane, Frost, Shock. Energy Pendant, +3 damage and status dealt by allies. So you see this, you may want to do an ally run. Mind Tonic, +2 max hand size. You too can pretend you have an Neema's level 4 passive, regardless of who you are. Or if you're an Neema, you can just double up by buying a Mind Tonic from the market. Finally, Sturdy Plate, +2 shield gained. This is incredibly strong. Sturdy Plate is honestly kind of crazy in terms of how much of an impact it can have for you. +2 shield gained means that every single card you play that gains you shield gets you 2 more. If it gains you shield more than 1 time, it gets you 2 shield for each time it gains you shield. That's incredible. Absolutely amazing. On top of that, 4 of the existing items have changed. These are mostly minor buffs. Health Tonic is now +25 max health. It was +20. Mana Tonic is now +5 max mana. It was +4. Recovery Tonic is now +8 recoverable health. It was +5. The one that I think actually does matter a decent amount is Shield Tonic is now +5 shield, max shield, which was +2. And +5 max shield is actually a pretty respectable amount. That will matter. It's kind of like having 5 extra health in every fight, which is nothing to sneeze at. That's like effectively 5 extra ranks of the forge thing that like heals you for 4 at the end of every fight, in a certain way of looking at it. So yeah, that's market items. Relatively short thing here. Lots of cards got new art. Yay, new art. Everyone loves new art. Look at this little guy in his armor. He's so happy to be in his new armor. Look at this little guy. He's going to have such a bad day after you summon him. This is what that guy looks like after you summon him. You're going to murder him because you're a monster. Anyway, lots of new art. Look through your collection. If you see art that looks new, assume it is. Next up, new card backs. So there are 11 new card backs. We have first the Release Celebration card back. Everyone who played prior to release will automatically get it for free. Otherwise, it will be in the last category I'm going to talk about here. This card back you get for beating Depth 4 for the first time. This card back you get for the first time you win a run with an idol with 1 or more idols enabled. I think it is only starts counting after you have gotten the update. So if you have won with idols in the past, you will need to do that again. And then finally, there are the remaining several card backs, 8 card backs. You just buy with gold or ether. That includes this one if you start playing after this patch goes live. So, we also have some new achievements. 6 new achievements total, 3 of them for Maighir. These are the same as what you have for other characters. We have 1 for unlocking the character, 1 for getting the character level 5, 1 for getting the character level 10. Easy enough. There's an achievement. This one isn't actually new, but it's now possible to get for being depth 4. There's 1 for completing all story quests, which is everything in the guild hall. I believe there are 10 quests total, so you'll need to have done all the ones that existed before now, and then you will also need to tackle Final Confrontation, or Outside Influence, and Final Confrontation, and Special Meal. And then finally, there's one that I haven't gotten around to getting yet, which is you complete a max depth run, which is depth 4, with 15 or fewer cards. It says in hand, in deck. I mistyped that. And editing is for cowards. So, yeah, completing a max depth run with 15 or fewer cards in your deck. And I am bad at removing cards. And you have to be pretty aggressive about removing cards to get this achievement. So I haven't gotten it yet. And then next up, some changes to existing achievements. So the first one, the big one, any existing achievement that refers to maximum depth is now going to be a depth 4 achievement instead of a depth 3 achievement. This isn't technically a change. They still have the same wording, but they are now much harder because depth 4 is much harder. However, one achievement, Flood, which is previously you had to have only mana cards in your final deck, that's just not possible against depth 4. That would not work. It could not be done. If you can do it, absolutely let me know. Send me screenshots, send me videos, send me any proof. Would love to see somebody pull off the old Flood where you have only mana cards in depth 4, but I don't think it's possible. So now it is just 20 or more mana cards in your final deck. So you need to have a lot of mana cards, but especially if you're working on, say, the Librarian achievement where you need to have 70 cards in your final deck, it's pretty easy to just double dip on those two. Well, easy. You are still beating depth 4 with 70 cards in your deck. So I haven't done a set of videos on trying to get all of the achievements on the new system. I probably will at some point, but I haven't yet. Next up, this probably deserved higher billing. Breach Wanderers is now available in 5 additional languages. Chinese simplified, German, Korean, Portuguese, and Spanish. And of course, it's already available in English. I'm speaking to you in English. I figure, based on the fact that I've shown you cards in English, and you're listening to me talk in English, that you could just intuit that the game is in English. And then it's also still available in French, of course, which it has been, as far as I'm aware, has been available in French for a while now. But yeah, additional languages. If you live in one of those places and you have friends who are not fluent in English, or if you yourself are more fluent in these other languages, I believe there's a option in the set. If you go to the options menu, there's a setting you can flip to change the language to whatever works for you. All right. Card rebalancing. So this last section, really a grab bag of different stuff. So several cards have been rebalanced, but I'm going to start by talking about shock. Basically, every card related to shock has been rebalanced to make the theme more cohesive and effective. I've got 3 cards here that are kind of your main damage payoffs for shock. Violent Discharge, which previously did something if you were shocked and that was it. And now it is a lot of damage to all shocked enemies. And if you are shocked, you will lose a shock to deal even more damage. You have Lightning Call, which still does damage to any enemy that is shocked, but now it automatically will be drawn whenever you shock an enemy, which means that if you can chain shock enemies, you could, for example, play Lightning Call, then shock an enemy again to redraw it, then Lightning Call that enemy, then then shock another enemy to redraw the Lightning Call, and repeat. And then finally you have Intensifying Beam, which will deal damage to any enemy for every rank of shock among all enemies. So you can really just say, screw that one guy in particular and obliterate him. I've had some very good luck with Intensifying Beam in a couple of my runs. I've done thousands and thousands of damage with Intensifying Beam relatively easily. It's great. You should try it. Next up, discard cards. So basically the entire spell discard theme has been reworked to try and make it better. I'm still not the hugest fan of the deck, that I have been distracted by trying other strategies, so I haven't really tried it as hard as I maybe should have. You can see here we have Void Bolt and Fueled Beam and Void Eruption, which are all now just generally better damage cards than they were before. And then finally, just a lot of cards changed, just overall. In total, a little over 200 cards have been changed in some way or another from the previous version. This is not counting all the new... this is not the new cards. This is just the changed cards. I obviously am not going to be able to cover every single change. Not even close. I'm not even going to try to put together a video that covers every single card change. I haven't done that for any of the past patches. I do have plans to put together my 10 favorite changed cards type video. Look for that in the future. But if you want to see just all of the card changes, the patch notes have a card-by-card breakdown of everything that changed, and it lists what changed about the card and what the card was before. So if you want to see details of exactly what changed, or if you in the back of your mind you're like, I think that changed, but I don't remember, patch notes will tell you for sure. And the Breach Wanderers wiki, I have put together a thing so that you can see the patch changes for any given card by going to that card's page. So if you are curious about the history of a card beyond just one patch, you can see it there. In addition to cards being rebalanced, a lot of items have been rebalanced. Some of them were buffed, some of them were nerfed, and some of them were just made more interesting. Here we have Crystal Ring was nerfed slightly, or actually quite a bit. I think it's crystallized applied by spells +2 on life patch. It's now only +1 crystallize, +2 max mana, and then -1 crystallize effect. Oversized Twin Sword got a pretty massive buff. It is now +1 strike hit. It is still +1 strike hit, but now instead of strikes costing 1 more mana, they just do 2 less damage, which may sound like a lot, but of course powerful will more than make up for that very quickly. And then doubling Spyglass now does require you to discard a card in order to set it up, alas. So those are just 3 of the mini cards that changed. I probably will do a video about the new items. I don't know if I'll talk about all the items that changed, but we'll see. Next up, idle stuff. So idols can now be invoked regardless of what depth the run is, once you have completed the quest, of course. So if you want to fight idols in depth 1 run, go for it. You know, you can fight all the idols in a depth 1 run if you want. You know, you do the Easter egg to unlock the extra idol slots, and you can fight 7 idols in a depth 1 run and get the weirdest mix of very easy enemies and very hard fights that you could ever dream of. In addition, you can now invoke idols when replaying quests. I have part of a series recorded called Quest Super Mastery, where I am trying to fight all the quests with 7 idols enabled. I got through some of them before getting distracted. But look forward to that. Next up, rush changes. So you now pick more cards when starting a rush run, and you think you get additional epics and additional upgrades, whatever, if you have idols enabled, but I don't have the exact numbers on that. In addition, if you are playing rush mode and you have idols enabled, you'll get twice as many idol bonuses after the normal and elite fights. So if there were 2 idols active, in that fight you will then get 4 bonuses. Now you can only get a max of 4 bonuses this way, which will not the max of 4 will not matter if you're playing with a normal number of idols, 1, 2, or 3. But if you're playing with 5 or more idols, then it's possible for a fight to have 3 idols active, but you still will only be able to get a maximum of 4 bonuses that way. So, alas, you cannot get completely crazy on idol upgrades. But it's your own fault for playing with 5 idols enabled anyway. Next up, Idol of Emptiness was nerfed slightly. The global passive for it is now only +20% max status for enemies instead of +30%. So now Shock and Arcane will be 12 to 24 instead of 13 to 26, which is pretty nice. Makes it that much less annoying. Curse got a new icon. That's it. Yay! AoE enemies, I love this change. Enemies now have an indicator when they are applying status that's going to hit all allies. No more having to just guess about or trying to remember which enemy attacks are going to hit your allies and which ones aren't. You can know by looking at them. I won't necessarily save your allies, but at least you'll know their doom is coming. Drofis is level 1 passive. Okay, so we're almost at the end, promise. Drofis' level 1 passive now creates a blood burst whenever the player loses health from a card's effect or from an enemy attack. not from when she loses 3 or more health. So mostly this change won't be noticeable. You play blood tap, you play life tap, you get a blood burst. That's the same as it was before. You get attacked by an enemy, that you get attacked by an assault wisp and it hits you 5 times, you get 5 blood bursts. Same as it was before. The main difference here is that blood bursts are no longer created due to debuff, reflect, or arcane detonation damage. So if you have bleed 3, you can no longer just create an infinite change of blood bursts. You can no longer just attack something that has reflect in order to create an infinite number of blood bursts. The other change that's going to be very impactful, blood bursts are now only 1 mana and they deal 10 damage instead of being 2 mana and dealing 14. Which means Drofis is a lot less mana hungry than she was before. It's a lot easier to just throw out a hand of blood bursts. And that just overall makes it generally easier to play Drofis without going all in on mana as much. Especially because Blood Burst Plus is still 1 mana cheaper. So if you play Ritual of Blood, all of your blood bursts are now 0 mana, which is obviously a pretty good improvement. Last note here, enemies that have triggered effects, when they hit a certain health threshold, they now have an indicator on their health bar. See that here? It's a little bar up and down that will tell us that when we hit that, something is going to happen. In the case of this Ruby Dragon, it means that Drakes are coming out. It is worth noting that you don't have an exact number on this. You will just have to kind of eyeball it. And also, enemies that have multiple triggers, for example, Benta Swarms that summon a Benta after they take a certain amount of damage, or Sludge Connoisseurs that give you treasures after a certain amount of damage, do not get indicators. This is only if they have one thing that they do at a specific health number. So, that is all the changes that seemed worth including in the video. It's not quite everything. If you want to see all of the details, official patch notes still exist. Still a link in the description. I still recommend you go check that out. That's going to be it for this time. If you have any questions, by all means, leave a comment. I do try to answer questions that people leave, or you can go to the Discord, and that will likely be faster than waiting for me to check my YouTube comments. And absolutely, leave any feedback on any questions you have, any comments, videos you want to see, stuff of that nature. But that is going to be it for this time. I will see you next time. Until then, toodles.